morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe's culture of political violence is one of the problems that the nation has had. We don't seem to have any idea of how to stop it. The tragedy is the evidence has been produced and explanations given why we have failed to address this problem. We had a golden opportunity to address the problems of Zanu PF rigging elections and using wanton violence to stay in power. We had that golden opportunity during the GNU of 2008 to 2013. Alas, not even one token reform was implemented. This has been at the heart of our problem. During the GNU itself, the people were not aware of what was going on. The other day, I went to great length to explain that the primary purpose of the 2008 to 2013 GNU was to implement the democratic reforms which would have stopped the blatant cheating that happened in the March vote, followed by the wanton violence that followed the runoff. The reforms, if they'd been implemented, would have stopped Zanu PF, broken Zanu PF's links with key institutions like the ZEC, the police, the army, the CIO, who have been doing Zanu PF's dirty work of rigging the elections. Not even one token reform was implemented. I think what most people find disappointing is that the people failed to realize what was going on. Although some people tried to explain to them what was going on. The problem with many Zimbabweans out there is they farmed out political activities to their leaders. They would rather believe what the opposition leaders tell them is happening and not open their own eyes to check what is happening for themselves. And as long as you remain ignorant of what is going on, you will be exploited. And they've been exploited. I've often quoted David Coulthard's book, in which he clearly admits that Zimbabwe's electoral process was flawed. He's talking here of the 2013. And he says it was so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical thing to do was to withdraw. And yet, as he explained in the quotation at the bottom of your screen there, he and his fellow opposition leaders have continued to participate in these flawed elections out of greed. Coulthard and his MDC and friends could not withdraw from the elections because they feared that MDCT guys would participate and win the seats. And likewise, MDCT. In other words, they've continued to participate in flawed election processes, knowing fully well that they're flawed, knowing fully well that if you participate, you give Zanu PF legitimacy. They've continued to do so out of greed. The people themselves have got absolutely nothing from it, other than give Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuate their own suffering. There is by-elections going on right now in in Harare, and the violence has reared up again. Here is an audio from Change Radio reporting on the violence in Glenview.
Yes, baba nditsanangure zvaitika muGlenview.
Ya zita rangu ndinoitwa Eric Murai. Tiri pano pamba pakanzera Marera. Mazuva esaya tichiita makampenzi edu ekuita by-elections kuziya kwamunoita kuti takashayikirwa nahonorable akata. Saka tiri kuita makampenzi edu, tichiita makampenzi edu zvakanaka, zvisina mhirizhonga, zvine runyararo. Asi nhasi tasangana nechiitiko chinoshamisa mumusha weGlenview. Chiitiko ichi ndechekuti tiri kuona sekuti pakandwa anonzi mabhombu. Handingati petrol bombo, but ndiri kuona kuti atori mabhombu erudzi rwepamusoro. Zvinhu izvi hazvina kutipadza. Chiitiko ichi chaita kuti tese tinge tisikafari nezviri kuitika, because tinotarisira kuti vanhu kana vachikwikwidzana, kukwikwidzana mutambo, haisi hondo. Izvi zvinokonzeresa mhirizhonga. But ndine urombo kuti kune vanoona neumwe muono usiriwo usina kunaka. Pano pakuwara mota, padestroyiwa mota 2 dzakanzera Marera beyond repair. Pakuwara pabhombwa imba yakuwara zvekuti zvakaipisisa. Next door, dzimba dzemanext door dzaaffectwa nebhambo irori, dzatotemuka dzikanyika mawindo ese. Chiitiko ichi chaitika futi kwachampion Rateiwa. The same dzimba dziri panext door nawo dzese dzaaffectwa. Zvinoratidza kuti bhambo iri nderemhando yepamusoro. Asi chiri kutongondishamisa ndechekuti muGlenview munomu taita ma-elections akawanda, by-elections akawanda ataita muno muGlenview. Hatisati tambosangana netsaona yerudzi.
We can stop it there. The point here is that the damage, according to the gentleman, was not caused by petrol bombs. It looks like they were real bombs. So his also assertion that we have not seen any of this level of violence, I think is not true. Cannot speak specifically about Glenview itself, but I think in Zimbabwe, the culture of violence, particularly during elections, has always been there. Zimbabwe's violence peaked in 2008 during the runoff, when Zanu PF orchestrated the so-called Operation Mafutera Papi, where the idea was to punish the electorate for having rejected Zanu PF in the earlier vote. In 2008 has become the watershed elections, in the sense that both SADC and the AU were compelled to reject the result of the 2008 elections because of the level of violence and the blatant cheating in the earlier vote. Here is Mnangagwa boasting about his role in 2008.
2008 patakaita ma-elections pakaposa papinda Tsvangirai ndandiri election agent ya president. Ma-results abuda tiri party headquarters vamutasa vanga vari secretary vedu ve-administration vamutasa muripi ndafona ndiri kwarusapi komogwenda kwarusapi seka ma-results achibuda kudai vanga aiwa zvako izvo Mnangagwa ndezvako endaenda kumusha ofisi vanga vabisa zvinhu zvavo zvose watofunga kuti zani yadini yaparara. President ofona zvakamira sei kati ndomamira zvakaita takatodini kateda sei manje mama ndikati abvudzai baba nditaurira baba gadzirai politburo cabinet musarangarira zvimwe zivi gadzirai chi cabinet asi nangoda kuti muzive kuti 2008 ma-results abuda vamutasa vakatiza.
As a country we face a generational transition. Vana vesa vari kuma below 35 they are crying out for help. The country is in a mess. Arusuru, we know we are inheriting a mess. We know this country has been left with nothing.
I'm assuring you that starting from tomorrow, you'll see a different nation from what you have seen or read on the news about these results and everything. Where we are going ahead there, the situation will be very different. What we said to our people, they could not see with their own eyes. We're going to act as we see it fit. We're prepared to go the whole distance.
The tragedy is during the runoff, the 3 months runoff in 2008, as many as 500 people were murdered in cold blood. Millions were internally displaced. Hundreds of thousands had their property destroyed, or they were beaten, raped, or otherwise suffered some form of intimidation. That was the reason why SADC refused to accept Zanu PF's claim that they had won the 2008 elections. And they forced Zanu PF to go into the GNU. Alas, not even one token reform was implemented during the GNU, because Morgan Tsvangirai and his fellow opposition leaders could not resist the Mugabe trap. He bribed them with the trappings of high office, and they forgot about the reforms. And they've been participating in these flawed elections ever since the GNU debacle, out of greed. In 2023, they participated in the elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, they'll give Zanu PF legitimacy. But what is the most significant thing that happened in 2008 is that SADC and the AU, we had given the election process a clean bill of health since 2013. In 2023, they condemned those elections. They said the process was flawed and illegal because it failed to meet Zimbabwe's own constitutional and electoral law requirements. And it also failed to meet SADC's principles and guidelines governing democratic elections. That is what SADC said. And it is interesting to note here that those MDC, Triple C leaders who had participated in the 2023 elections on the basis of a lie that Chamisa himself told them he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes and Triple C was going to win big. It was just a blatant lie. What else could he say? He couldn't tell them we're participating out of greed. So he had to lie. But when the results were announced in 2023, SADC had already said the process was flawed and illegal. And it is interesting to note here that that did not stop the Triple C leaders who had participated in those elections out of greed, taking up their gravy train seats. Here is Margaret Dongo speaking of the Triple C leaders' greed in 2023.
With the leadership, because they have a look. You asked me a very good question. You were in the Central Committee, you were a member of Parliament, you were this and that. Why are you feeling the pinch? It's because, I didn't believe in corruption. I'm not a selfish person, I'm a selfless person. And I'm like a social worker. Politics is not a business. This is what I want to remind most of our MPs and other people.
Do you think they look at it as a business?
Yes, they look at it as a business. Because they look at it as a business seriously. Because the moment they go, business and employment creation, because if they go to Parliament, you are employed. You get a car, you get a stable salary, and you are paid until your term is over. Already you are employed. If you are out, you're out of employment.
If you serve 2 terms, you get a pension?
You get a pension. Then already, this is why people kill in politics. They kill to be in Parliament. This is why we have violence in this country. Because there is no employment. The only employment which is there is in politics. There is no other outside employment. So for them, a very good example is, look at what happened to CCC, the Triple C party. Have a look. When they lost, when they said they were rigged, what I expected from them, I expected all parliamentarians to say, we are not going to go to participate in a rigged system. And we are not going to sit in a rigged parliament. Because the elections have been rigged. So all of us were not going to parliament. Imagine what could have happened. We could have gone into new elections. There's no way Zanu PF was going to roll alone.
You think so?
Yes.
Do they care?
caring or not caring, the public would have forced them because the majority of the people would want representation in parliament.
But they went anyway.
But they went. They realized that, you know, you heard them complain, I used my own money to be in parliament. But what about me who have voted for you? I used my own money. So the idea is to recover. Is it a business where you want to recover your losses? Is it a business? Politics, is it a business where everyone else, when you get in parliament, you want to recover your losses? A good example is now, parliamentarians have been elected. I don't know when we last saw our member of parliament in this.
So the key issue here, which I think Margaret Dongo is trying to emphasize here on, is that the people themselves have got to realize what is going on. You can't vote for somebody into positions of power and authority without saying what is it exactly you want them to do. In this particular case, if they are participating in a process that is so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical thing to do is to withdraw, but they are doing it out of greed, do you seriously think they will ever represent you? Why is it that 25 years after the MDC was first formed in 1999, the penny has not dropped? Why is it that the ordinary people cannot see that they are just being used here? That is what beggars belief. The violence we are seeing here in Glenview is not the first time, nor is it going to be the last time. It's all a meaningless contestation between Zanu PF and the opposition, when we already know that the opposition is there out of greed. They have no other ambition other than going for the trappings of high office that Zanu PF is dangling in front of them. I think we were very fortunate in 2023 when SADC and the AU election observer teams condemned Zimbabwe's election process as flawed. What should have happened from there on is people should have said, okay, we already know that the process here is flawed. Let's put it right. What's the point of going through another election process when you already know that the process itself is flawed and illegal? If Zanu PF is able to rig the elections, of course, it will do whatever it likes once it's in power. Some people will say, oh, well, at least we have got some representation. Those who are the few people who win these elections are not going to save the public's interest, because these people are participating out of greed. They know themselves that the process is rigged. So there is no chance of the result reflecting the people's wishes. But they'll participate anyway out of greed. So they're just using you. After 45 years of rigged elections, I think the people of Zimbabwe really have to wake up and sit up and pay attention. If you want to stop this insanity of rigged elections, you have got to be the one who have got to stand up and say, no, we are not going to keep on participating in flawed elections. Do not expect the opposition leaders to do that. They are participating for their own selfish reasons. It's you who have got to do it. SADC and the AU have given people the opportunity to do so. There is absolutely no excuse for keeping on participating in these flawed elections when you know they are flawed. It's up to Zimbabweans. I think that point cannot be overemphasized. People have got to wake up to that reality. Here is Dr. Neves Mumba of Zambia, who was the chair of the SADC election observer mission in the 2023 elections, talking about that very issue, importance of free, fair, and credible elections.
Said to me, Mr. Vice President, go on behalf of SADC, and all I expect from you is to help to give the Zimbabweans a free, fair, and credible election. Those are the only, he said it twice. I need nothing from you, Mr. Vice President, but free, fair, and credible election. You would have done your job. When I was in Zimbabwe, and we were on our way to go and see President Mnangagwa to pay a courtesy call on him, I contacted the president here, President Hakainde Hichilema. I said, Mr. President, we are going to see your colleague. Do you have a word for him? Any greeting, whatever? He said, no, the only thing you tell my colleague is that let's go ahead and give the Zimbabweans a free, fair, and credible election. He repeated the same words. So there was one.
Free, fair, and credible elections. We did not have free, fair, and credible elections in 2023. And SADC and the AU said it. Why would they expect you to keep on participate in an election process that they themselves have judged to be flawed and illegal? But if you participate in your millions, as you did in the 2023 elections, you leave SADC and the AU with no other option but to take that to be the democratic wishes of the people of Zimbabwe. If you are easily conned into participating in a flawed process, then you've got to accept what we are seeing here. This blatant violence, bombing. The violence tends to get even worse during by-elections because there are no SADC or any other observers there. It will be incomplete if I was to close this without mentioning the role that some of our media, like in this case, Change Radio, have played. While they've reported on the violence, they've been amiss when it comes to reporting on the way the opposition have cheated the people, encouraged them to participate in flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed. Reporting on the violence, as in this case, without telling the people that the only way, sure way of stopping this culture of violence is forcing Zanu PF to implement reforms. Change Radio in the 2023 elections were the cheerleaders of Nelson Chamisa and his CCC group. They were adamant that CCC was going to win big because Chamisa had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. When it was clear that the elections were rigged, they have never taken Chamisa to task. Why he had told the people he had plugged the vote rigging loopholes, when in reality he had not done so. So it is tragic that most of our so-called independent radio have played their part in brainwashing the people instead of educating them. Chamisa is a liar. He lied to con people to participate in flawed elections in 2023, in 2018, and he played his part in 2013 as well. And he was in the GNU of 2008 to 2013. He had two video clips of him. First one, lying about how CCC was going to win.
Makorokoto Zimbabwe, nokuti hakuna munhu anomira kana denga raronga plan. Denga raronga plan, denga harifoiri. Plan ya Mwari haifoiri. Ini ndatanga kugadzira cabinet. There is no way we are not going to form a new cabinet. There is no way we are not going to have a celebration. There is no way we are not going to have an inauguration. Let's start preparing for our inauguration. Let's start preparing for our celebration.
The follow-up clip is where he is being taken to task. In this case here, by BBC reporter, when he is being forced to admit that he lied.
Ende patakasangana na Trump akatibvunza navakomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Serious questions were raised about your behavior in Washington, D.C. You did see some senior people on Capitol Hill, some Congress people, but you also claimed that you'd seen Donald Trump. You claimed you had a conversation with him in which you said he asked you how much you needed to move the country forward. You told him $15 billion, and he said to you that he would provide the money if you won the election. That was not true, was it?
Sangana na Trump akatibvunza navakomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
It was not true that you'd seen Donald Trump and that Donald Trump indicated to you that he would provide, if you won the election, $15 billion.
All those statements were said by other people, not what I said.
Kasangana na Trump akatibvunza navakomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Well, no, because there is a video which shows you at a rally in January back home in Zimbabwe saying that Donald Trump had pretty much promised you $15 billion. To be clear, because some people in Zimbabwe are still confused, you're now telling me you did not meet Donald Trump.
We did not.
That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. That somebody can blatantly lie to con people to keep participating in an election process that is so flawed, so illegal. The logical thing to do is to withdraw. As you can see, this by-election is taking place on the 12th of April. The people of Zimbabwe, if they had any sense at all, they should stop participating in flawed processes. What is the point of having a constitution, of having an electoral act, when even something as basic as a verified voter's roll cannot be produced? And you, as the individual, why are you participating in a process like that, that is so blatantly flawed, to give it legitimacy? And this is not the first time you've done it. Ever since the GNU debacle, Zimbabweans have been participating in these flawed processes. When it's been explained to them that the process is flawed, is illegal, and the only logical thing to do is to withdraw. I hope this bombing is going to be a wake-up call to the people in Glenview that they should not participate in it. Why do you keep on participate and give the process legitimacy? The Zanu PF is going to win. And in this particular case, part of the bombing is to scare people so that the party wins. Why do you have to pay a big price for it? Rules are made for a purpose. And this whole idea by the opposition that they can win rigged elections, it's a nonsense. Why would you want to participate in rigged elections other than greed? Why? Why would you want to persistently participate in rigged elections? Zanu PF knows that as long as it dangles a few gravy train seats at the nose of the opposition, they will keep on participating. The opposition leaders themselves are getting something, but you, the electorate, are getting nothing from it. That is the point. As we move towards 2028, this is what we should be looking at. 2028, people should not participate in those elections unless Zanu PF implements reforms. Because if they do, they could not possibly expect any change. Zanu PF will never lose an election in which they've got so much opportunity to rig. This is what has kept Zanu PF in power these last 45 years. The carte blanche powers to rig elections. SADC have given us a platform. 2023 elections were flawed and illegal, and said why. We should make sure that there are reforms to make sure that those flaws that were mentioned by SADC in 2023 are put right, or we do not participate. That should be the message. That should be filtering through to every Zimbabwean out there. Thank you very much, those who were able to join me this evening. Hope you'll be able to do it again tomorrow. 7 o'clock UK time, 8 o'clock Zimbabwean time. Good night.